I'd like to welcome everybody live and who's watching online to our February 22nd City Council study session. Call this meeting to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mayor Harkey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Councilmember Lopez.
Here.
Councilmember Rowe.
Here.
Councilmember Ellis.
Here.
Councilmember Orlando.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, City Clerk. So Council, we had a few items called in tonight. I called in 1921 to have a presentation that combined all three. Councilmember Harris wanted a presentation on 20, got you covered. Councilmember Orlando, the same on 21. So Leah, can you please talk to us about these three? Make a presentation. Thank you.
Is that showing? That's not showing on your screen yet. Okay. There we go. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for this opportunity to come provide an update on really the whole situation that's been happening through COVID with the moratoriums on rental or evictions, with the different types of funding that the city has provided, with the different types of funds the federal government has provided. And that's what we're going to do tonight, is really walk you through a timeline of what has occurred. Okay, so I'm going to spend quite a few minutes on this timeline because it really tells the story. One of the things that has been driving this process, as you know, is the eviction moratorium. So you can see here that when everything started, the first moratorium was ending July of 2020. It then got extended at the local level, at the state level, until October 31st of 2020. At the same time, at the federal level, we started to see the eviction moratorium, and it continues through today till March 31st, 2021. This is extremely important as we look at the funds, and I'm going to show you in the next slide all of the different funding that's been available and the expenditure deadlines associated with that funding. But what I want you to keep in mind throughout this presentation is that every time the moratorium is extended, we know that somewhere out there, there's most likely a backlog of people who have not been paying their rent that we may not have heard from yet. And so that's the really important part that I want to point out as we're talking about this moratorium. Along the same lines, there's all of the different types of funding that the city has received or has allocated. So the first, we had the CARES funding, We had our own CDBG dollars that we allocate each year. We had our CDBG CV1 that became available. And we had those dollars go out to assist both our general fund dollars and our CDBG CV1, as well as some CDBG dollars go out to help with rental assistance. And you can see that those, as our annual process, we took it forward at the same time this last year and then move forward from there. The other piece of that it comes into play about this time is the funding from Maricopa County for our hotels. And I do have a separate slide later on that'll talk a little bit more about that hotel program, but that is one of the items on your agenda this evening. And so we received the funding for the hotel program. And then again, those were set to sunset at a certain date and were extended again in the fall and then one more time tonight as you have it before you. At the same time, we then received, after that, going on into September, we received the notification that we have CDBG CV3 dollars. I will talk about that one in a minute. But what I think is really important to focus on right now is what took place in December. And we appreciate Council's quick reaction to what we thought at the time was an end of the moratorium on rental assistance, the end of the funding that Ascend had been receiving from the county, and quite a few applications, a huge backlog of people that were pending evictions. We came to council. At that time, I gave you our guarantee that we would spend City of Chandler dollars last, and I'm going to show you that in the future slides too. Right after we came to council for approval, Maricopa County came with additional funding for Ascend. They also changed some of the way that they wanted priority spending to happen, and that has played into this picture. And then in January, we learned about the new Treasury dollars, which again, you have on your agenda this evening. So all of that has come into play over from the time period of December 10th to where we are today in trying to determine which funds should be spent first and who's qualified for those funds. And I really have to thank our partners with both Ascend and Salvation Army who have been working on this, and we have been in constant communication with them because it is changing on an almost daily basis. Again, tonight you will see that request for the allocation of those Treasury dollars, and so we can talk about that specifically in a few minutes. Before I move on from this timeline that has a lot of information, are there any specific questions on this? Because it really does help tell the story of where we are today.
Proceed.
Thank you. So here are the dollars themselves, and again, I want to walk you through this. So the Maricopa County CARES Act, this is the hotel money. We had that we have an expenditure deadline of March 31st. This is the piece that you see before you tonight, and we'll talk a little bit more specifically about that for that section. The next set of money is really where we get into the rent, mortgage, utility assistance, and here's where you see the CDBG Public Services with the June 30 deadline. You see the AZ CARES Act with also a June 30 deadline. We see our general fund that we allocate with the June 30 deadline. So coming into play with all this is Ascend will take the city dollars, for example, the general fund, and when they were granted that money earlier in the year, that is the fund that they have the most ability to be flexible with. They can, for maybe somebody doesn't qualify, let's say for CDBG funds because of something with their income. They have the most flexibility with the general fund. So typically what Ascend will do is take those dollars every year and they'll divide it over 12 months. So that's a piece that comes into play later on when we start talking about water bills in particular. So keep that in mind. Again, the different criteria that goes with this funding. Also at the same time that all of this is happening with these funds, we had Maricopa County that came in and they had originally an expenditure deadline of December of 2020 that Ascend was needing to spend about $5 million at that point by December of 2020. So these are the latest deadlines that we're working through. The one though that I want to call to your attention that is changing everything is the US Treasury dollars. And that's an awful lot of money. That's a big allocation compared to the other allocations that we've been given. This money, although it has an expenditure deadline of December 31st, 2021, there is a deadline of September, the end of September 30th, for 65% of the funds being spent. And anybody who has not spent at least 65% of their funds by the end of September, the Treasury will come in and sweep those extra dollars. So even though it appears that there is until December, we need to be on track with that money being spent through that September deadline. And then we get back into our CDBG CV1. And again, I'll remind you that you allocated that last year, But because of the April 2023 deadline, we've pushed that money to be spent later because of that. And then our CDBG CV3, we have not allocated yet. And that's also because of that expenditure deadline in 2023. So like I said before, it's kind of an ever changing. As soon as new money comes in with new deadlines, this ends up being adjusted on how this money is being spent. Specifically, what's been done today, looking at Chandler dollars. So these are the numbers served by Ascend and Salvation Army. And you can see the amount that's been spent on rent mortgage assistance, utility assistance, and the total of unduplicated households. Over 2,000 households have been served. What's important to know on this is right now, only 10% of it is City of Chandler funds that have gone towards these expenditures. These are the dollars the City of Chandler has allocated because, again, of those expenditure deadlines. And there's still about 430,000 roughly that's available to be spent from those previous pots of money. The moratorium extensions, delaying requests for assistance, that's something that I had talked about before too. And then the Treasury program is going to allow for larger rental payments. So that we expect to see larger payments per household being made. But what's really important to keep in mind with this is it does not allow for mortgage assistance. So when I talked about those more flexible fundings, the flexible funds, this is something where our flexible funding is important. And so I wanted everyone to keep that in mind as well. With the AZ CARES money in particular, you know that you have an item tonight that reallocates those dollars. And we'll talk about that reallocation is really based on the fact that we know we have this influx of almost $8 million that needs to be spent by September. And we have about $430,000 left in the city allocated funds at this time too. So that's the reason for the reallocation on those dollars. Water assistance, let's talk about that in particular. There has been very little money available for water assistance. Most of the money that's been allocated has been used for rental assistance. That's what it's been earmarked for. Specifically, when you look, and I showed you a few slides before, there was utility assistance. That's also for electric, for gas. So when you boil it down to Chandler water customers, this is the amount of money that's been allocated today. The Treasury funds completely changed that, however. The Treasury funds are going to allow Ascend to be able to pay full water bills. And what we're hearing from Ascend is that people are coming in with their asking for utility assistance first because they're starting to hear about getting shut-off notices or knowing that a shut-off date will be coming. So they're coming in the doors with those utility requests and for large amounts of money. And then they're realizing that they may also qualify for some rental assistance. And so the Ascend group is doing a great job of making sure they take each individual household, determine what is the best course of action for them, what funds are available that they qualify for, and setting out a course for them. So I know that you will start seeing there will be a greater number of payments and a lot more money basically coming for water assistance beginning with the allocation of these Treasury dollars. And keep in mind that with these wastewater, it covers water, wastewater, solid waste. There's over 2,600 delinquent accounts right now with about 1.5 million that's due. The average late bills are running at $550, but again, because we haven't been doing any shut-offs, you're going to see people with larger bills, much larger than that. And so again, we expect to see greater amounts of money coming out in one payment for these utility bills. The way that this has been working is that we have worked, my department, the CARES team that's funded through the CARES money, has worked really closely with utility billing. The utility billing office knows to refer people who are behind on their payments to the CARES team. The CARES team is trying to help facilitate things because Ascend has such a huge demand on them. Our CARES team will walk through with the customers what's available to them, what documents they're going to need to apply for assistance, how they apply for assistance, just to try to facilitate that process for both our resident and also for Ascend so that they can process applications more efficiently. We've also done proactive outreach, and because of the small amount of dollars that are specifically available for water assistance, the CARES team has targeted that towards those that were the furthest behind on their accounts. But this will now allow us with the Treasury dollars the ability to proactively reach out to more customers who are delinquent on their water bills. The ongoing need, it's something that's, I wish I had a crystal ball clearly over these last few months, but looking at where we think we're going to be in the future. We know that there's a backlog of 602 applicants. We know that the conservative estimate, based on what has been allocated in the past, would be about $2.5 million. However, keep in mind the Treasury money allows for up to 12 months of assistance. So if someone was behind on their rent 9 months, it will pay that 9 months and can allow 3 months forward. So we expect that there will be much higher rental assistance paid. Same thing with utilities. As I said before, there were small amounts of utility bills being paid. Now we will see greater amounts. So the 2.5 is a conservative number. We do expect that it will be higher than that, certainly to serve this backlog, and then of course moving forward. What we also know, though, is that it's going to be contingent on the moratorium. If the moratorium extension, if there's another extension, we may see that prolonged demand. And in addition to that, we have heard, we got an update today, as a matter of fact, there are a couple different bills at the federal level that may provide additional assistance. I know one of them was for another 25 billion to help with rental assistance and utilities. So we're anticipating that there could be more money at the federal level that will help meet this need as well. But right now, like I said, we've got about 602 applications with a very conservative estimate of 2.5 million.
Councilmember Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Good presentation, Leah. A question for you on the rental assistance. Is any of the money to be paid out, is it conditional when it comes to landlords in any way?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Rowe, conditions that the landlord must meet? Is that the question?
No, let's say that somebody applies and and the CARES dollars are used to help them. Is the money paid to their landlord?
Yes, through the mayor, Councilmember Rowe, it is paid to the landlord in almost every situation. The only exception would be, and this is only new with the Treasury money, that it could be paid to the tenant. And then at that point, there'd be an attestation that the tenant did pay the landlord, but majority of the payments are made directly to the landlord. There is also a request that the landlord will stop any eviction process they're in if they've already taken some people to court. And we have heard that even though there's a moratorium in place, some landlords are going ahead and filing their court documents so that the second the moratorium is over, they're able to execute and quickly get a determination that they can evict. So what's being asked as far as that assistance, if the landlord is accepting those dollars, is that they stop the eviction process.
So that's an ask, or is that conditional?
We're still working through the details on that as to how conditional we can make that. So the city of Chandler, the town of Gilbert, because Gilbert Ascend is serving Gilbert residents as well, Maricopa County, Tempe, Mesa, Phoenix, Glendale, we are all working together to make sure we have the same rules across the cities and across the county. And so that's one of the things that we're still working through as to whether we can make it completely conditional or an ask. I think, we're going to try to make it conditional, but we're still checking through all of that.
Councilmember Harris.
Thank you so much for that great presentation. I just wanted to ask a few questions.
Sure.
Ascend and Salvation Army, is those the only two partners that we're working with in terms of utility assistance, rent assistance? Are we working with other non-for-profit organizations?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Harris, yes. The two that we contract for is Ascend, who takes the majority of the federal dollars. There are a lot of restrictions and a lot of bookkeeping and many reporting features and audit features that come with these federal dollars. It's quite a bit to administer. So Ascend, because they administer our other federal funds, gears up for that. And then Salvation Army, we give the general fund or the AZ CARES money that's a little less restrictive on the auditing and administration. And those are the two that we have granted funding for. We have not had applications from other agencies in the last few years for this type of assistance. Going back probably, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago, St. Vincent de Paul used to apply for funding and they did receive a small amount. But for the last couple of years, it's just been Ascend and Salvation Army. And then it also does make it easier for our residents to know what those locations are and to be able to publicize this is where you go for funding. Makes it a little bit easier on our residents as well.
I got a second question, Mayor. My second question is that and this might be for Dawn or the city manager can help me out with it. I just want to make this straight for the Chandler residents. I know there was an article that came out that said Chandler is seeking to cut off utility assistance. And I just kind of want to make sure that we just make it straight for the people that what we're doing in terms of helping people pay their bills. You know, you're doing your part. And this may be a question for Dawn or city manager. But I just kind of want to make it straight for the city. We're not looking to cut people bills off, but we're actually working on trying to, you know, obviously use the dollars that's available to help them with their assistance. But not only that, being able to allow them payment plans past May. So can you talk to that, city manager, just a little bit so that people can understand?
Sure.
Thank you.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Harris. So as Don talked about at the last budget presentation, we are looking at May 3rd as the date to start back with making people comply with the ordinances. Now, then with that said, utility billing has always, prior to COVID, during COVID, all of that worked with any resident to make payment plans or things like that if they fall behind on their utility bills. In this case, I know they've been working, as Leah said, directly with neighborhood resources as well. So we have some opportunity there for those that truly need the help and can qualify under those programs. Short of that, if they are willing to make a payment plan and all of that, we'll work with them. But if they do not contact us, and after multiple attempts of trying to reach them and all of that, then we will look to start shutting water off again May 3rd.
My last question is that how are we attempting to connect with these individuals that may be behind on their bills? What are we doing from a city perspective to make sure that they know we have assistance here?
Yeah, so through the mayor, Councilmember Harris, there has been 2 letters that have gone out so far, 3, Don says now. The third one has gone out to those that are behind on their bills. We will continue to do that. They will continue to get notice with now the official date. And again, we always ask for them to call the utility billing office for assistance. And we've had a lot of success with these 2 initial letters and now this third one. Let's see.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, while we got you maskless for a second, does this mean, if we don't pass this through, does this mean that we'll have to raise rates for those that are paying their bills, or?
Yeah, through the mayor, vice mayor. So as we continue to see those unpaid accounts continue to rise, where we're up now to, as they said, over about $1.5 million, where we were at about, I want to say 300,000, maybe less than that before COVID. So if those continue to grow and we don't do something about that, at some point it will start impacting rates. And as you look at the rate model over the years of things that are needed, it could require council to consider raising the rates because of this issue. So we have to be able to make sure that everyone is paying for the water and wastewater and services that they're using. These are enterprise funds and act as businesses.
Thank you, Mayor, or thank you, Marcia. So our dollars are real dollars. Federal dollars are printed at will. We're going to be using federal dollars mainly to pay these things off. Landlords will be taken care of, and ultimately our utility and water fund will be taken care of.
Through the mayor, vice mayor, yes, that is correct. That those dollars that are for utility assistance for the water bills come directly to the city of Chandler is how that's paid.
Thanks, Leah.
So we're going to have more questions, but if any of these items you're going to get to later, just tell us that and we can defer. So,
Okay.
Councilmember Ellis.
Thank you, Don. Most likely she might answer that after, but my question would be, yes, we are helping now. What is the plan for the future? Because if you can't pay now, most likely you won't be able to pay after 6 months. So what are we doing? Ascend and Salvation Army are doing to empower people to help them with the future of those bills being paid. Maybe you're going to be talking about that a little bit later.
I actually do have the next slide that talks to that a little bit.
Thank you so much.
Any others?
Yes,
Councilmember Harris.
I wanted to ask city manager, I'm sorry. I wanted to know, with the $1.8 million or so, do we know if it's comprised of business versus residential? Do we have that data to say Because these dollars sound like they're helping more residential type dollars, but are we experiencing this delinquent balance from the business community that may not necessarily be able to go and apply for a utility assistance outside of our Choose Chandler, but do we know the data on that?
Yes, through the mayor, Councilmember Harris, yes, we have all of that data. I will tell you, it is a mix
Okay.
of both residents and businesses, but I'm pretty sure, I'm gonna look at Dawn, but most of it is made up primarily of residential customers, I would guess on that.
Yes, through the mayor, Councilmember Harris, the amount we're talking about this evening is just residential, but we do also have non-residential accounts that are past due, and we're working on a plan to address that as well. But it's currently not part of Chandler's process to disconnect on any business. We will continue to work with them, but we are looking at I guess, a plan, our collections plan to roll forward with in the future and bring forward potentially to talk through with mayor and council.
So, Mayor, Councilmember Harris, as Dawn said, we've been talking about this for a little bit because you're going to get in the same situation if you allow businesses to continue because the good actors will take care of paying their bills. It's the bad actors that will just let it continue, knowing that the city will never cut their service off as it sets today. So something to consider in the future for sure.
Thank you, Mayor.
And very, very likely, Dawn, if a business is not paying their water bill, this is probably one of several problems that they're having. So this would not be an isolated, similar to a rental situation. So,
That is correct, Mayor.
okay.
Yeah.
Let's continue.
Well, thank you, Mayor. And going into the previous discussion about how are we making sure that our residents know about the assistance that we have available, I wanted to share some of the information from our Chandler Cares team. You can see here that most of the requests that they've been assisting with, the greater majority of it has been those utility assistance. So again, we're working with management services to make sure that we're reaching out to our customers. 502 residents contacted to date, and the agency referrals 424. What is also speaks to this is you can see 137 residents have already been to court at some level of a court for the eviction piece of this. And keep in mind, this is 137 residents with a eviction moratorium the entire time. So it's really important. What our staff actually does is they look at the court calendar that's coming up for the week, and they try to get contact information for the people on that calendar and reach out to them, at not only the resident, but also landlords, making sure that landlords know that they can point their resident in the direction of the send and get assistance. So we try to educate on both sides of that. One of the other things that we're doing to go along with Councilmember Ellis's question is we have one family self-sufficiency specialist who is also working with families that are behind and are coming forward for rental assistance, similar to what we do in our public housing and Section 8 program, where we're working with that family to see what are some things that they may be able to improve in their overall situation so that they can come out of this in the future. And looking again at those dollars, the amount of money, there's been a lot of a lack of education, I will say, on the part of residents and landlord, the tenants and the landlord. And what we hope is that as more people are starting to come forward for this rental assistance, they're going to realize it's important to try to pay what they can towards their rent. Unfortunately, we have had people that just thought it was you could stop paying rent, basically, and mortgages. And that's unfortunate that people have not had the education they needed on really what this meant. So we hope that some of what could happen in the future maybe doesn't occur, that they won't have the need as bad because they just misunderstood. And we've actually even seen that with our own public housing tenants. We've had some people who weren't paying timely rent because they heard there was a moratorium. So our staff certainly reached out to educate them and explain to them what the moratorium means and how they still have that obligation to pay rent. So hopefully that education will take place through here. We do think that this is going to go on for quite a while as far as people that are behind on rent and mortgage payments. We do have high hopes that there will be additional federal money that comes out. There's not money for mortgages per se compared to the money for rental, and that's a concern as well, that we're hoping that there are not a lot of foreclosures in the future, but a lot of that's going to depend on is there future assistance for homeowners as well. I wanted to make sure I touched on the hotel program because that's one of your items that you have tonight. Just to remind you, this is the third extension that we have from the county for this program. This takes our most vulnerable homeless population and gets them into hotels. So you can see that we've had 108 people that we have served to date. And what's really exciting is that we have 47 that have moved to permanent housing, and then 13 have gone into emergency shelter. And currently, we unfortunately have lost one person through this process, and we've had a few negative exits. But overall, most everyone is complying with the rules that we have put into place and is able to successfully move on to that next stage. And for some, 47 moved out of homelessness. We currently have 31 programs, people in the program, and it fluctuates. You know, we might have a family of 6, we may have individuals. So it just kind of fluctuates as far as the number of bodies that are actually in the program at any given time.
Yeah. Did you say your team has moved 47 people out of homelessness?
Yes, to permanent housing.
That's incredible.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Vice Mayor. What I will tell you is this hotel program, I think, has been more successful than any shelter program we have seen to date. Getting people into this environment where they are in their own single room helps to, I think, reshape the way that they're looking at their lives. And we've seen that. We have seen people that we have been trying to get into resources for 2 or 3 years, and we get them into a hotel. We have one couple in particular. You get them into the hotel, and a month later, they were signing papers to move into their housing. So it has done some incredible things as far as helping people kind of get regrounded and start to look at taking care of themselves.
And also, I would like to say it's the fact that when you guys have them in the hotel, I believe that you give them a wraparound service while they're there. It's not just putting them to shelter them, but you bring in social work, you bring in the team, everybody, medication management, all those things are in place to help them. Can you please tell me, out of the 47 that you put into housing, how many of them have jobs now that are going to be able to keep up paying for those housing?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Ellis, you are correct that absolutely we have those wraparound services, and I will look to Ryan. Keep in mind that some of the people are either on permanent disability or they may be elderly and they may be on Social Security. So I'm not sure that everybody is work eligible, and I'll look. Do we have a number, Ryan? Yeah. So we can definitely get back to you on that number. But a lot of this is our more vulnerable population that may not be able to work. Yeah, and our navigators are absolutely amazing. You've heard us say that before. Our navigators are incredible, and they are the ones making sure that people are staying safe in their hotel rooms and starting to look at what's next for them in their lives. With that, that was the end of the formal presentation. I'm happy to take any additional questions.
Mayor.
So I think you had a question specifically on 20 and you on 21. So let me start over here. Is any questions to my right? All right. Councilmember Orlando.
Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for all you're doing. I appreciate it. Couple of questions. First of all, showing your chart here, it looks like you're about 60-something, 65% success rate in diverting people, getting them out of housing, emergency shelters. That's outstanding. It's a good metric to be measuring things by. So it is working in that respect. In fact, that folks aren't being evicted is working. Folks that, eventually get the utilities, it's working. So the program is working. And it's something long, I guess, needed at this time to get us through this pandemic. So that's the good news. So you had 602 backlog, and I believe you had something like that last time. It was a little bit higher, maybe. What are we doing for personnel to get those backlog numbers down? Can you hire temporary people to help get these backlog numbers down?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, I just actually had a conversation with Shauna about this. Ascend has just hired 4 people, and they're looking at hiring another 4 to 5 through the CAP office to be able to not only respond to the money that the city of Chandler is giving them, but you also have to remember they have money from the town of Gilbert, and they have money from Maricopa County to serve Queen Creek and unincorporated areas. So they have geared up. They have leased additional office space, additional storage space, as well as additional staff. Internally, we have hired our CARES team members that are helping to go to not only do the outreach to the residents, but then we've actually had one part-time staff that we brought back for more hours to help us on our end with the administrative piece, because especially when you're dealing with these federal dollars, we have a need to make sure that we are doing all of the appropriate bookkeeping and invoicing and keeping track of all the files, that type of thing. So we've been using temporary staff for this.
So, and my next question is this, thank you for that, appreciate it. You're talking about 7 months using 65% of these dollars. Have they been allocated already after tonight's vote? They'll be allocated?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando,
Or
yes,
Thursday,
with the
sorry.
exception of the CDBG CV3, which we have not allocated yet. We're kind of holding that to see where the need is, since we have until 2023 to spend it. Which, with the action tonight, you will reallocate the CARES dollars, as well as allocate the treasury money. And then, of course, accept the allocation from Maricopa County for the hotel program.
So I guess my question is, I know you only deal with 2 agencies, the Salvation Army and Ascend, but are other nonprofits coming to Ascend and asking them for help in particular areas? And that's something she could work with as well, the group?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Orlando, I can let Shauna certainly address that. One thing I want to make sure that everyone realizes is with most of these dollars, we have to be very careful that there's not duplication. And that's the other reason for really limiting who has these dollars to allocate for us, is we need to have the agency be able to track what's happening with every individual household, and to make sure that in this case, both Salvation Army and Ascend work very closely together to make sure they don't have a family come over to Ascend and then go to Salvation Army. Same thing with a landlord. With these new treasury dollars, landlords can apply for it. However, they have to have all the documentation from their tenants. There's still all the income qualifying for their tenants that has to occur. So we want to make sure that there is not any duplication of services, and that's why we feel strongly about making sure the federal money is going all through one agency. But certainly I'm happy to have Shauna come up.
Okay, I'll tell you what, let's do this. Maybe end of June or sometime, either come back to us or give us a note on what's going on, what's expenditure, and if there's anything we need to do in order to get this money out to the folks that need it, okay?
Yep. Through the mayor,
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Orlando, happy to give an update. And one thing I will add is through the Forest City Network, we continue to communicate with all of the nonprofits on a regular basis. So if we're making sure that people know, especially with this new treasury dollars coming, if we start advertising that, we're going to make sure that we have all of our partners through Forest City, which is majority of the nonprofits, as well as many of the faith organizations, knowing that these dollars are available, and they can have their congregation members or their clients also tap into Ascend if they're in need.
Okay, I just want to make sure there's a plan in order for us not to give this money back if there's still a need out here. Obviously, there's no longer a need, then great, we'll give it back. But, okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
I'd also, I look at this almost like milk cartons, and you certainly want to drink the one whose expiration date is closest and kind of push back the others. And I appreciate the work that you and your staff does. Ascend and Salvation Army have been great partners for us in the community, and they're trusted partners in that. And I know with Councilmember Orlando's question that just the relationship of our nonprofits and working with one another, they're very capable and do work well in recommending and sending things back and forth. And I also know that, again, if need be in the future, we have still money from the initial CARES that we will be making decision if need be as part of if there's need here or in a business community. So as well as I've also been tracking the money from DC, and I heard initially they were talking about following a CDGB formula, but not CDGB pathway. Is that still the plan with whatever money might come to Chandler, or is the debate moving on elsewhere?
Through the mayor, or excuse me, Mayor Harkey, through the mayor, Mayor Harkey, that seems, we'll see how that evolves. We have heard the same thing ourselves. I can tell you that the Treasury money was a little bit different than that. And so it's kind of, I think it will depend on how those bills are written. There is also, some of the money went through the state. The state came to all of the city and the counties to say, do you want to funnel all of your money through us? And we said, no, thank you, because of the duplication issue. What we don't know is if down the line, for example, the state is not able to meet some expenditure deadlines, if any money may flow back because of that. So we're just kind of waiting to see as well. Today I read that there's one bill proposing 25 billion towards rental and utility assistance, and then possibly 10 billion of that might go through mortgage, and then there's another bill for 75 billion from homeowners assistance. So I think a lot of it just depends on what passes through the federal legislation. In addition, historically, we've received our funding through HUD. The money that we have today, as you know, is through the Department of Treasury. We've also been notified that there is supposed to be additional money coming through the Health and Human Services Department that could go specifically for water bills. However, we've not seen any additional communication on that. So moving forward, I'm not even sure what department may be allocating these funds. And I think depending on that department will dictate what the allocation process is, what formula they use, and certainly what the reporting piece of this is.
So don't count your chickens until they're hatched.
That is correct. And then when they hatch quickly, I can tell you.
Yes. Well, very good. Councilmember Harris.
Just one last question. We've been in the pandemic since March. I'm sure that there's been residents that's been helped by Ascend and Salvation Army to help them get caught up to where they are. But there's still probably that same group that may need a second assistance to kind of further them along. Maybe they haven't found the job. Maybe they went back to work. They're not getting the hours that they need. Their income is still down. They're still struggling. Can a resident go back for a second application per se? And if so, how many months would they have to wait in order to see that reapplication again?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Harris, with the new Treasury dollars, a family can get up to 12 months assistance. Now that 12 months doesn't mean that we're paying 12 months in advance. It means that we're going to pay what's in arrears. We're looking at paying 3 months in advance, and then they can come back for an additional 3-month time period, up to a total of 15 months. But if you have a family, let's just say that's a month or so or 2 months behind, they will get that money paid. They'll have the 3 months up ahead in forward pay. But if they need to come back for assistance, they have to come back and recertify. The reason for that is to make sure that there's not an income change as far as that now they don't qualify for income. So we are looking at, as well as the county and the cities that I mentioned, everybody is looking at that same 3-month certification to be able to come forward for additional assistance. The total eligible is 15 months of assistance through the Treasury money.
I was going to say thank you for caring. I think a lot of the residents out here a lot of them are in different areas in their life, and the pandemic has caused so many different struggles and hardships for everyone. And I just want to tell you, thank you for caring. Thank you to your team for doing such a good job. The city manager, thank you so much for leading this great team that we have, that we call City of Chandler. But I think our team has been resilient, and I've seen nothing but that spirit of caring coming from your area, no matter who needs help, no matter where they are, no matter how good or bad shape they're in, you're there. And so I just want to tell you thank you, and we appreciate that spirit of caring that you give. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. I have an amazing team that puts their whole heart into this work.
I really like the regional approach that you're taking in terms of devising these. There's a lot of wisdom in other cities, as well as just, I believe we're stronger when we're in this types of thing, adopting similar principles. So I appreciate us being part of a greater consortium with other cities and learning together how can we best meet the needs of our individual communities. So, Council, any other questions related to 19, 20, 21? All right, these were the only questions that were called in. So, Councilmember Orlando.
Mayor, I want to, just for the record, have staff come up and tell us there was a resolution to 8. As you know, we received a letter from a resident in regard to this final plat. And again, I just want the staff to come up for the record that we were able to resolve this issue.
And before you do, I mean, we don't really, city attorney, do we have any say on final plats?
If I may, Mayor, on final plats, as long as they conform to all the requirements of our code and any requirements of the zoning, it is an administrative act. And we would need to I would recommend that we approve it as long as they meet all those requirements.
So in this case, if everything has been met, even if we have a individual in the community that is not happy, we would do ourselves more harm by not proceeding with this. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor. Again, so long as all the requirements have been met.
And in this
So-
particular case, this was I think there was a concern over an irrigation ditch that, again, we've stated multiple times, again and again and again, that that's not our purview. Is that correct?
Mayor, my understanding is that is a private irrigation ditch. It would be a private issue. I know it's been talked about through the entire development process, but that is really something that has to be worked out among the private property owners.
Okay. Sorry,
Mayor,
Councilmember.
let
I
me,
just wanted to-
let me just share what's different about this, because I sense I agree with your concern. This person went through a process. He presented the issues at the process.
Mhm.
At the last minute, he didn't get a warm, fuzzy feeling that his issue was being addressed. So that's the stage for this issue. Am I correct, City Attorney?
If I may, Mayor, Councilmember Orlando, if I understand the concerns being raised, and again, I have not been privy to all those discussions.
Right. So that's the difference in this issue right now. We're not denying this plat. We're just asking the residents, the individual who made this promise to the residents, there's 3 residents there, that they would fulfill this obligation. This resident has not seen anything in writing, and he brought this up as an issue, and staff looked at it, correct, staff? I mean, you guys heard about this, and you could weigh in. That's the difference right here. That's all. I'm not trying to deny a plat. I'm just trying to make sure one of our residents has a full process, and they're feeling like that they were being heard during this process and being listened to by both sides. That's all we're trying to do here.
Do you still have a question?
Well, I just want to make sure that we resolve the issue.
Mayor, council members. I believe it is. So while the final plat is like the
Right.
city attorney mentioned, it's an engineering document, and it's really that next step on that path that ultimately leads to a subdivision being built. As part of that construction, there's an irrigation line right now that will be more than likely undergrounded. And the issue about ongoing kind of long-term maintenance obligations that would fall to the HOA of this future subdivision, that the obligation, while it's not the plat, it actually is done through the CCNRs that will be recorded later. That resident wasn't clear that maintenance obligation had been totally worked out through the CCNR. So we were able to speak with the resident, also speak with the developer, and then ultimately kind of staff kind of get out of the way and let the two of them talk. And it's my understanding that today they had kind of exchanged emails back and forth with a more finalized version of that language that will ultimately make it into the final version of CCNR. So I believe that ultimately they're just getting them in communication, and they're working it out.
Yeah, again, I don't think it's a matter of us disapproving the plat. I just want to make sure that we're holding everyone to their agreements during this process. That's all we're trying to do here. It's trying to hold everyone to their agreement. If they agreed to do something and one of the residents, whether it's a resident or a developer, quite frankly, could be the other way around, feels like they're not being obligated to their agreements, then we have a discussion point. That's all we're trying to do here. Thank you.
All right. Council, anything else on our agenda? Obviously, Thursday, we've got a couple action items and some other things that we'll be looking at, including a presentation that you also have in front of you, the recommendations from our bond committee. So be ready. It's going to be a robust evening. And with that, this concludes our meeting.